Welcome, everybody. It's Tuesday night at 6 o'clock. It must be all Things Brunswick. We have a great show set up for you tonight. I'm Bill Moore.
I'm Dan Roman.
I'm Greta Lehman.
And you're here for All Things Brunswick. We have a guest who's going to be here shortly. He's tied up in traffic, so we're going to talk a little bit till he gets here. And fortunately for us, there's plenty to talk about. So there's not really an issue where we need to go. The question is, what do we want to talk about?
There's so so much.
Shall we start with the latest Trump stuff?
Go ahead. I'll let you.
If you listen to today, we now have a request for a master to be stepped in by Trump to take a look at all the stuff.
That.
Oh yeah, he's formally filed for a master now to look at all the documentation.
So
special master to come in and review all the documentation to decide what they should have taken and what they shouldn't have.
Oh, okay.
So the chances of that happening are slim to none. But he's out there trying.
Well, you want to hear a funny one?
I'm going.
I was watching something and they were talking about the FBI. Did you know that the FBI was not created by Congress? It was created by presidential decree by Teddy Roosevelt to start.
Yeah, it was out of another agency.
Yeah,
it was a carve-out.
It morphed out of that.
Yeah.
So in theory, they're saying that if Trump gets elected, he could disband the FBI if he chose to by executive order. There's nothing to stop
That's
him.
an interesting. I haven't.
And reconstitute it into something else.
You know, I'm stealing somebody else's thunder because they were going on and on about it. But wouldn't that be interesting to see day one if he got rid of the FBI? What are they going to do to him?
They'd all become IRS agents, part of the 87.
Well,
I think I know. They'll impeach him again.
Yeah, but depends who holds the House, all right? They're going to impeach him anyway. But
Right.
I just laughed about that one. That would be like the biggest stroke of genius. Right on par with him endorsing various Democratic candidates in New York.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Yes, I did.
That was
brilliant.
That's
Classic.
trolling on a next level troll.
He was absolutely brilliant with that, and they were so uncomfortable saying, "I don't want his recommendations." Too late, you own it.
He's playing 3D chess. They're playing tiddlywinks.
Do you know what bothers me more than anything? Do these guys have any brains? Think about what they're trying to do. They just came out today that they now have proof that Joe Biden, by his authority, lifted executive privilege so they could go in and grab these documents.
Yes.
Now, do you realize the precedent they're setting?
Yes.
What goes around
Republican
comes around.
president takes over all of a sudden everything that President Obama left with, everything that Biden left with when he leaves, hopefully soon, when he leaves, will be subject to just being grabbed because they've started a precedent that they're going to have to live with.
They don't think long term. They think short term. They all have Trump derangement syndrome, as we know. So they're so focused on getting him out of being able to run by any means necessary. And again, I've said this before on the show. I'm not a biggest Trump fan. I would vote for DeSantis over Trump any day. I don't deny that. But the levels they are stooping to attempt to prevent him from running is going to backfire on him, to your point, right? Because anything they're doing now can be turned right back around. And let's hopefully that some of it is. I don't want to stoop completely to their level, but hopefully the Republican Party stands by what they're saying they're going to do and holds hearings. I mean, Hunter Biden, that laptop is out there. And it's just sitting there.
And Dr. Fauci leaving won't make a darn bit of difference if you listen to the people in the House and the Senate. Put us in control, and that man will be in front of us the minute we take over.
Which I think it's December he's leaving. Is that when it is?
He said December.
Yeah, so I think you're starting to see the rats jumping off the ship. Fauci is worried about what's going to happen. And the fact that he will no longer be in charge of that is irrelevant. They can still call him in. And he's not retiring from what I understand. He's just not taking that position anymore.
No, he's retired.
He's retiring.
He's got 50 years.
Well, the word I heard was going to go to some other thing.
He is, but he's got 50 years civil service. So
he's going to have the largest pension.
Yep.
Well, he's the highest paid right now at
Right.
$500,000,
And
not
think
counting
about
what he
that.
gets from his other hookups.
Yeah.
and the
There's
things
a
he's getting
question.
behind the scenes.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. There's-
Big Pharma might be funneling him a few dollars.
Well, not
here
only
and there.
that, but I think some of the experiments they've done in China, it will be interesting. But Greta, what's your thoughts on this Trump situation?
I want to say that I feel it goes back to the 80s, to Harry Reid and Newt Gingrich. And I love my Newt. Don't get me wrong. I do love you, Newt. But I think it started when those two started playing nasty little games in the 80s, and it just continued and snowballed to this time. The only difference now with Big DJ is that he's better at it.
Oh,
The guy, every time something happens, I always say, I just know Trump planted that. I just know he set that situation, because he is very, very good at laying traps. He really is.
Oh, he's a master at it.
He's a master at it.
He, like I said earlier, he's playing 3D chess.
Welcome. We have our
finally
guest.
beat his traffic and joined us. So, Chad, we're glad you came along. Thank you. So
Howdy.
We were just filling some time up in the air talking about the Trump derangement syndrome and the latest stuff going on with that.
Yes, there is a lot of TDS out there.
Oh,
No
you
doubt.
think?
A little bit.
So anyway, but we're glad you made it.
Thank
And
you.
For those of you who don't know Chad has been a radio host for years all around the state, Raleigh, down here in Wilmington. Probably one of the most knowledgeable people you can find dealing with North Carolina affairs. And we're glad we have him brought on and brought with us to share some information with us.
Thank you.
So welcome aboard. Did you get a chance? We'll start out with the hard stuff right off the bat. Did you
Anything
get a chance?
you throw at me, I'll just play. It's
All
Wimbledon,
right.
Wimbledon, first round.
Okay. Did you get a chance to look at the Civitas poll that just came out?
I did not.
Oh, excellent. Now we got him.
Part of lock now.
Yeah.
Kind of weird from used to 10 years apart now.
But it's some interesting thoughts in there. It's interesting because, for example, Ted Budd, who had a 5-point lead a month ago, is now dead even with his opponent.
Literally
Sherry-
dead even.
That's in
Literally.
line. That's in fact, the WRAL poll shows Beasley ahead. It's the only show her ahead, but not.
But it is that is not what they said exactly in the survey, right?
Go ahead.
What they actually said was they flipped the question. You know how they say, oh, definitely I'll vote for a Republican. Definitely. Okay, so they flipped the question. So they said for Ted Budd, I will definitely vote for Republican Ted Budd. 32%. I will definitely go for Sherry Beasley. 36%. But they flipped the question, so you think they're near tied. They really aren't.
Well, so there's an interesting phenomenon. Gingrich wrote about this in a column earlier, in which he talked about August being
The silly season.
yes,
Yeah.
and it really is, historically speaking. The party in power, they get this kind of false sense of confidence. August, which they say, oh, we're pulling even, everything's it's going our way, and they've got a lot of confidence, especially on the Senate side. I think they recognize they've got congressional side. The issue with Budd, and I was interviewed for another, Budd and Beasley are fighting it out. She has a fundraising advantage right now. She has significantly more money than Budd does. Budd's campaign, and I believe it is being run by Mark Johnson's former, the guy who, gosh, I wish I could remember his name right. I'm drawing a blank. But the guy who ran Mark Johnson's campaign for lieutenant governor when he left becoming superintendent. And the issue they've got is they haven't been aggressive on the money side. I think they're relying on some kind of Republican wave, and with Trump's backing, that it's going to significantly make things even. Beasley's following the model that we saw back in 2012, maybe 2014, when Kay Hagan and Elizabeth Dole faced off. Dole had about a 90+% name ID. She was a Red Cross leader, high name ID, Dole's wife. And so the Dole folks, the folks running that campaign, thought that they had it. By the way, Jonathan Feltz is the name I was thinking of. That's who's running Ted Budd's campaign. And so what they're looking at, Kay Hagan was a no-name. She was poorly known. She was in the North Carolina legislature. In fact, she was kind of a sacrificial lamb, if you would. The Democrats didn't think they would win that seat, so they put her up there. She's a very nice lady, but they raised money, and they spent that money in July and August. They ran aggressive campaign ads, these ads making her look very moderate. We see that playing out now.
do.
These
we do.
Beasley ads are playing in every market in the state. They're
Yep.
playing in Charlotte, Greensboro, Raleigh. They're playing down here in Wilmington. You see them. As if she's a moderate. She is not. She is as left-leaning as anyone that's in D.C. right now, as much swamp critter as anyone. But she's running a very good campaign.
She is.
And she's
Bud-
cleverly attacking Republicans and Democrats for that.
She is. Well, that's what it looks like. But make no mistake, Chuck Schumer's really happy with this attack. So the problem with Bud is he's got to identify himself beyond the realm of Trump. He's got to make the case that he has a solid group of values beyond being a family gun store owner, beyond, like I said, the Trump endorsement. He's got to make the case for why do we need him to be our senator. And that's the hill. He can't just rely on the GOP. He can't just rely on Trump. He's going to have to make the case. Now, I do think it's silly season. I agree with what Gingrich said. So things look decent right now, but following what happened with Kay Hagan and Elizabeth Dole, the sad thing to see is that Bud's team is doing the same thing Elizabeth Dole did. Yeah. The difference is he doesn't have the name ID that Dole did.
Yeah.
No, and I agree with you. I know, for example, the party was doing some work to try to put electronic signs around the county, and we've made some approaches to them to see if they would help, and they're kind of on their own doing their own thing. So.
And the Democrats are going to make an emotional appeal. This election is going to become very emotional for them. It's going to be abortion. It's going to be climate change. It's going to be all these debt forgiveness for college loans. If you're someone who paid off those college loans, you got to feel like, why? I worked hard and I paid off my loan.
Or if I didn't go to college and I went out and said, work
Sure.
my hands,
Yeah.
why am I paying someone else's
It's all
college?
emotional appeal now. They're trying to say, look here, we're talking about, and you see it on Twitter and social media, and it's amazing the plethora, this pandemic of spin that we're seeing. Whereas on the other side, they want you to not look at gas prices are actually 40% higher than they were when Biden took office. That the economy is not in great shape, and that none of these legislative initiatives that they've put forth are going to make things better. They're just spending a lot more money. And when you have to call something the Inflation Reduction Act, and it really doesn't do anything for inflation, and you'll notice that they won't even talk about inflation, it's a problem for Democrats. But November is coming, September is coming, and after Labor Day, this thing really gets into high gear. It's still halfway summertime for a lot of folks.
You want to? Well, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just thinking, do you have any clue what this October surprise will be? And there will be one.
Oh, there'll be a number of them. Well, we still have the unresolved issue with Trump, right? So we have this Mar-a-Lago raid. A lot of people are starting to look at this a bit more with even the Wall Street Journal came out and said, "Hey, this doesn't look real good. This looks like it may have been unconstitutional." They said a couple of things, but unless the FBI can put up some facts in this from an indictment standpoint, and they're mighty slow, and the people that were involved in it were still the unit that was involved in disparaging Trump for the past 6 years. So if the American public begins to believe that the FBI has truly been compromised from a partisan political attack standpoint, that's not going to bode well across the board for them. On the other hand, if they indict Trump in October, which is what I think they would love to do, that could be your October surprise, for lack of a better phrase. So both sides will be playing this game. And it's a matter of, but the Americans' attention span, they've been trying to sell climate change for the past 35, 40 years.
Yep.
Yeah.
Try 100.
Yeah, and it's just not where it's just like, oh, the end of the world. Well, when? It's not happening for them right now.
Well, I think it'll be interesting to see what happens in September and October. I am getting a little pessimistic, I'll be honest. About
Just now?
About
It took this long for you to be pessimistic?
Wait, no, about how the Republican Party is responding to this election. They're, in many ways, it's almost like they're sitting back on their laurels. Like you were talking about Beasley and Bud. I see Beasley's commercials nonstop. And they're very good. I'm going to give credit where credit's due.
They
She's
are good.
picking an issue. She's hammering it. She's playing the game. I'll be just like you're saying. Bud's commercial, I see one commercial. It's the little shopping cart, which I get, but sitting there going, he's playing the Reagan, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago card, so to speak. They're not being aggressive enough, I think. What are your thoughts on that?
I think Bud has a charisma problem, and I don't mean that in a mean way. He's a very nice guy, but I think electrifying a crowd and getting them excited and in tune. Tillis does Tom Tillis was a former councilman in Cornelius. He then becomes a House member. He displaces a guy named John Bluss. A lot of people forget that. John Bluss, hardcore right-leaning guy who went after Jim Black, who ultimately was arrested and put in handcuffs. But Tillis ran against Bluss as a moderate. People forget that. Then he becomes Speaker of the House because of that moderation, because he just is more interested in the process of getting things done. Becomes the Speaker of the House and in North Carolina, and then elevates from there right into Senate. Now, he's done a remarkable job of not having to get in the trenches of being a conservative. And I don't mean that mean, but I'm saying on the frontline fight about taxation, property rights, constitutional issues, things that the Republican Party should be and often is engaged in, Tillis has been able to say, I'm here to be a senator.
Yes, sir.
And Bud has got to find a way to differentiate. This is a battle. This is something they can't take lightly. And I think Bud is comfortable. But if you look at the Republican slate for senators, you've got several absolute neophytes. Dr. Mehmet Oz up in Pennsylvania, who's running against a guy who can barely conjugate a verb and can barely speak English right now. You've got someone in Georgia with Herschel Walker, who's a remarkably high name ID, but unknown politically, and so running against Warnock down there, and that's going to be an interesting play. The Republicans can't afford to give up. They've got to win. They've got to make +1 in this race to displace.
They got to
Kamala
hold,
Harris.
but they've got an ad.
But they've got to provide for the American public the vision. What is it? If we elect you guys, what is it you're going to do beyond we're not them? And that's the case they've got to make. And they're making it in the congressional races. Certainly Ron DeSantis is making the case every day in an aggressive way. If anyone should give you an illustrative version of how a Republican should act, it's him. He's not Trump. And people want to say he's Trump-like. No, he's not. He is his own guy. But he learned from Trump that those people in the media are not your friends. And you're going to have to fight for your own narrative no matter what. And here in North Carolina, I think the only reason we're kind of barely a purple state is because I think Republicans get comfortable and they don't realize they're going to have to fight and fight and fight. And I don't mean mean, but I mean define the race and make the other side respond to the things you want to do.
You heard that point from anyone else before?
Yeah, Greta's made that, sir.
Okay. It's something I talk about all the time.
You can never rest on your laurels.
At all levels, the Republican Party wants to play nice. And again, we don't play dirty.
No, they want to be liked.
They want to be liked. They're afraid of the media.
Yeah.
They are terrified about the media writing something bad about them, which the media is going to do anyway.
Nothing new.
Been that way for decades, but they're still playing that game, and it's time to step up. DeSantis, I talked about before you came in, is the guy I want running, not Trump, because of his ability to talk to people and say, this is what we're going to do, this is why we're doing it, and I don't care what the media says. And you see him, he plays them. He plays them masterfully. I always say that he's Trump with a little bit of decorum, if you will.
Finesse.
Finesse, whatever word you want to use. And he is the blueprint.
But he's also been in office longer. He's a former congressman, and now he's the governor, and someone who knows the game. But he learned, I think a lot of Republicans that studied what Trump did, which was unapologetically aggressive towards the media. But because of what's happened with DeSantis, he now gets attention. So once you're able to galvanize attention in the kind of manner that he does, because Kristi Noem would love to have that kind of attention. I think that certainly former governor of South Carolina, Nikki Haley, I think Haley would love to galvanize. There's no one on the Republican scene that can galvanize attention quite like that. I think Cruz losing to Trump certainly helped him in many ways. I think Cruz has become someone that's getting a lot of attention out there. But more and more Republicans studying this unapologetically conservative constitutional way of looking at the world, and that resonates with a lot of people. It resonates with people that are sitting around that kitchen table going, my God, meat and chicken and milk and my gas prices, they're telling me I'm getting $100 more a month, but look at this at the end of the month. It's not adding up.
When you go and you talk about what they're doing nationwide, what I find interesting is you start looking at Liz Cheney, for example. Her latest statement out this week was, well, now we're going to start concentrating on the Trump supporters and the people like Trump, like Ron DeSantis. And they're going to be moving after them because they realize they're the threats.
Let's look at that in a little bit of context.
Okay.
If we go back and look at Trump for a minute, first of all, I would say you've never seen anyone in our history that I can name. I've put it out there several times and haven't got an answer. Challenge my leftist friends. Name any American that has had the full force and might of local, state, and federal government thrown at them like this.
Hunted.
No one has ever been that attacked. Now, if they land up, I'm surprised there haven't been more indictments. I'm surprised there haven't been 20 in his history of New York politics, not to mention what's going on now. So if you take that and then take it a step further and say, what did Trump do that was significant from a Republican standpoint? He displaced the Clintons. He did. He relegated them to the loss column. He displaced the Bushes. He relegated the Bush dynasty to the loss column. He displaced McCain for any kind of legacy that McCain had. He displaced. So he is displaced. And then the Dick Cheney, Liz Cheney, all of these people that Trump pushed aside and was able to get the American public to buy into more. I mean, at this point in 2019, prior to the 2016 election when Trump won, so 2015, the year or 3 years prior, Jeb Bush was the heir.
Yeah.
I mean, there were columns written on Jeb Bush is going. Here's how Jeb Bush is going to lead as president.
And he had all the money.
And he did. He had the back. He had the network. He had everything. And he didn't have some of the negatives that his brother had. But then it comes along Trump, and then comes one video, please clap, and it's over. Please clap. Low energy Jeb stuck, and it stuck forever, and it relegated him to the back row of politics. So right now, trying to discern who's going to be the nominee in 24, as much as Trump has some, a backing, and certainly DeSantis does, trying to predict that, I would hate, because we don't know what events will transpire over the next 24 months, 13 months.
What do you predict for the General Assembly in 2023?
2023.
Well, if the election is over,
6 months from now.
We're sitting a new General Assembly in.
So I certainly think, Berger has done a remarkable job of defining. It's kind of rare to see that. Berger's an understated guy. His son's on the Court of Appeals. Phil Berger has done a remarkable job of running the Senate in a very conservative fashion. His vision 10 years ago when I was up in the Raleigh area was, I want to eliminate the state income tax. We are going to eliminate the state income tax. We're going to eliminate the corporate taxes, period. Now, they've made great headway in doing that. And it has made it clear for people that are voting to understand, if I'm voting for a North Carolina senator for Republican, I'm getting lower taxes. I know that. On the House side, it's not as clear. Tim Moore's been a very different leader. His rules chairman is an indicted felon now, David Lewis. There have been questions about Tim Moore's leadership. It hasn't been as clear with what they wanted. The fact that they were willing to acquiesce on Medicaid expansion for the governor, which they didn't need to do. No. It's like, wow, you didn't need to do that. You've got an election coming up. Don't worry about it. You're giving the governor a little bit of walking room, so to speak. So the House, I think that they get their majorities. I think they keep their majorities. I think the House will be interesting to see if they can transfer that into a supermajority. Now, here, I'll give it this caveat, that if you looked at the generic ballot back in May, you guys were talking about May and balloting, right. The generic ballot for Republicans in North Carolina was about a plus 11, meaning that anybody walking into any given poll was likely to vote for Republican with an 11-point lead.
Yes.
Now, why is that important? If you look at New Hanover County, a very vivid example of this is Deb Butler's seat. Deb Butler, probably one of the most left-leaning, hardcore, I will not yield, Mr. Speaker. She has this videos that she gets mad at the House and she walks outside and gives these videos. And she drew an opponent named John Hennett. Now, I've known John. He used to be head of Wilmington Downtown Inc. John is a fighter. John is someone who's very conservative. He's almost died. He's a fitness guru now. But nowhere would a Republican run against Deb Butler until a year like this happened. So this is kind of a really exciting election where someone like John Hennett can run against Deb Butler in a D+10 district and have a fighting chance of winning.
And he does.
And he does. But here's the problem. You mentioned it, I think you mentioned it, is that gap has narrowed. I think Republicans squandered what should have been an inevitable victory in November, and now they've given Democrats hope. And that's a four-letter word that really should bother Republicans right now, because the Republicans allowed the Democrats to seem like they had victories that weren't really victories.
Right.
When you increase the size and scope of the federal government and that looks like a good thing, that's bad. That means Republicans are somehow not able to galvanize their messaging. But heading into the fall, I think that September is coming. Things will change. I think the Republicans will have a little more, but they've got to be ready for that fight, to your point. They've got to be ready to engage. John Hennett's engaging, and it's very possible that the House could have a supermajority as well and make the governor as irrelevant as he should be. I mean, especially right now. Here's another October surprise. AG Josh Stein, the heir apparent to Governor Cooper to become the next governor of the state, may be possibly facing indictments for some ad.
Yeah, I saw that
now,
too.
Now, the weird thing is Democrats are oddly quiet about the fact that the AG is facing possible indictment while screaming about Trump. And the Democrats are saying, oh, it's an obscure law. It's never been used in 90 years. They're using every excuse. The governor today weighed in on that on Twitter. And he's upset about it because this is apparently rocking the boat, because Stein was invincible until now.
Yeah.
So it's going to be fascinating to see what happens next.
Should Stein have to step out? Who's next?
That's where the Democrats didn't count on. The Republicans have a huge bench. The Democrats, the bench is not as deep. It's very old. It's very gray. It's very tired. I mean, if you add Nancy Pelosi's age and Chuck Schumer's age and the president's age, you're back. Add them together, you're pre-revolution. I mean, you really. That's hard to believe.
That's what I hadn't heard
mean,
before.
Nancy Pelosi
Right.
is only 5 years younger than Social Security.
Right.
That's astounding. If you put that in perspective and you're thinking, gosh, you've been there for 40-some years and you're complaining that Social Security is a problem, you guys have done nothing to fix it. So bringing that to North Carolina, I think that their bench isn't real deep. If you look at the Council of State, there's no one they can really draw from to run for governor. They'll have they don't really have that deep a bench. And so would it be a big city mayor? Would it be someone from like Charlotte or Raleigh? Would it no name ID? It's going to be a very difficult hill, which also will make the Republican primary for governor more bizarre and higher stakes. Certainly Mark Robinson has teased it. Lieutenant Governor's been out there. Dale Folwell's another name that is making the rounds up in Raleigh because Dale's got a known record in history and isn't as emotionally charged. And y'all have all met Dale Folwell before, I believe. He's been in this building.
He's been here several times.
He's been here several times. So it's a matter of who's going to run and how that shapes up. But Democrats are, I can tell you, there are circles in Raleigh right now where they're sitting around a table going, what the hell are we going to do now? So that is a problem if Stein has to face a possible indictment. And that's, behind a grand jury right now. They're looking at it.
Any over there? Ready to roll?
Don't keep going if you got it.
Oh, I'm ready to roll.
I'm enjoying listening to you.
Oh, good.
For once.
That's a first.
I just said for once.
That's a first.
I'm trying to be. Let you have a chance.
What are your thoughts about the chances of?
I think we might be able to pay a few bills, boss. What do you think?
All right, you want to take a break now?
I'm
that'd be
sorry.
fine.
I think we got to pay a bill.
We got a message there that we better pay a couple bills.
Yep.
So.
And I know that guy. Yeah, he's right.
Some people do.
Veteran Awareness sponsored by You Are Not Alone. Today's veteran homeless rate is approximately 19,750, and the numbers are declining because of the various veteran programs. If you or a veteran you know is homeless, please call 877-4AID-VET. This is a confidential and toll-free call. From this veteran to other veterans, please be there to help our brother and sister veterans. Again, the number is 1-877-424-3838. And thank you for your service.
This show is also sponsored by Dr. Tony Maglione. Dr. Tony is a cardiologist practicing in Wilmington. He accepts Medicare patients, and his office is located across the street from New Hanover Regional Medical Center at 2032 17th Street. The office number is 202-1071. Dr. Tony is an author whose last book is Rules for Conservative Patriots, and it can be purchased on Amazon. His website is www.drtonymag.com.
The Boiling Spring Lakes Motel, located at 2 North Shore, is a peaceful and convenient place to stay. Newly renovated rooms with a comfortable back porch welcomes everyone. Discount rates are available to those who might need more time. Close to the beach, everything you need for a fun vacation. Call Stephanie at 910-845-2893. Boiling Spring Lakes Motel. Folks, you must visit Angie's Fresh Produce. 4447 Long Beach Road, Southport. Beautiful fresh produce at a great price. Angie's has just about every vegetable you want. In-store shopping and pickup, and all wheelchair accessible. Call Angie's Fresh Produce at 910-477-9068.
Welcome back to All Things Brunswick. We're actually halfway through the show already, and we're having such a great conversation.
Time is just flying by again.
Yes, it is. And
you need to expand to like 3-hour show.
I think we should do a 3-hour show at the same price. We'll see if we can get that one pulled off. But anyway, we have Chad Adams with us, who's been a host all around the state, has got knowledge about politics, which is just astounding. And just listen to him explain things and take a very difficult subject and put it in such areas that even Dan and I can understand, which is really
it's a baptism by fire.
Well,
there you go. Anyway,
it's nice to have someone who can actually speak well on issues for once.
Chad and I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anyway, let's move on a little bit. Voter ID has again become another issue in this state. The Democrats on the state Supreme Court are playing their level best to get a chance to vote on it before they lose power.
Jeez.
And what's your thoughts on what's happening now?
You know, as a former county commissioner, as a former chairman of a party like you, Bill, and working at Locke for years, I always marvel that this is an issue. I've been astounded that Democrats have been able to try to justify that it's okay to have an ID to bank in this state or country. It's okay to have an ID to join a gym membership. It's okay to have an ID to prove you are in almost every realm of life except to vote for the most powerful people in the world and the people that affect our lives and can take money from us by force. And I don't mean that to be mean. I mean, taxes are the price you pay for freedom. But here's the thing. North Carolina made a tragic mistake a few years ago. Georgia and some other states passed voter ID laws that passed constitutional muster. In other words, they were challenged in court. They looked at them and said, there's nothing racist about this. There's nothing negative about this. This applies equally to all. And in fact, we've seen in those states that voter turnout has increased in states like Georgia and other states that have voter ID. So the entire silly argument about it suppressing voters is asinine. And it also makes Democrats seem very racist because they're alluding that one race doesn't have whatever capacity it takes to vote. That should be insulting to anyone who thinks that it applies to them. But in North Carolina, we made a tragic mistake because instead of doing all we had to do was copy the laws that had been passed in other states. That's literally all we had to do. Yep. But North Carolina went at it alone. And again, David Lewis, former representative from Harnett County, decided to draw up this on his own and pass it. And the Democrats recognized right away, great, you guys are going to get shot down in court, and they did. And that's why we don't have voter ID right now in North Carolina. I wish the House or anyone else would take up the exact wording that other states have used in past and pass it. Right now they have a governor that wouldn't sign it. They could have fixed it during McCrory. They didn't. And so now they're stuck. If they get those supermajorities, they could. Or put it on the ballot. Which would be interesting to do. But North Carolina needs it. I think every state needs it. I think, truthfully, it's the greatest way to ensure and protect the election. It shouldn't be difficult to do.
And the public supports it.
Democrats and Republicans support this.
Exactly.
It's like a 65% issue.
Yeah, 2 to 1, basically. And the fact that it is still an issue. You know, you brought up the point about the race with that. And I have friends of different races, and like, you never hear about the Asians having an issue getting their ID. It is
that there isn't an issue with any race.
Exactly.
It's other people that want to assert that claim to have dominion. That's even worse. It's very plantation-y. That they claim to have dominion over certain people and claim that, we represent those people and you're suppressing them. And those people are saying, no, we're not being suppressed. What are you talking about? And in state after state after state, it's proven that it doesn't suppress the vote.
And I think it's starting to show up in the black community. They're speaking back at this in many, many ways. And, I mean, you turn 10% of that vote around, you got a Republican landslide everywhere.
And that's big for the Republicans on a Big Tent basis. I mean, from LGBTQ to Black, Asian, Hispanic, the numbers are increasing every day for conservative, like-minded people. I think that it's interesting. Most folks in the country are socially moderate and fiscally conservative. And the more, which is why libertarians thought, why aren't we more popular? But they weren't. And libertarians, because they had some strange things about the military that didn't resonate with folks. But that's where the majority of people are. They just want the government out of their life. They don't care what happens behind closed doors in your house. As long as it doesn't affect me, I'm okay with that. Or if I'm not, you're still not affecting me, and I can still talk to my friends and neighbors and proselytize if I want to and be unaffected. So, it's going to be interesting to see if the Republicans can galvanize people in that way. That's really where they need to make headway.
Do you think aren't they in danger? If you look at what they're saying, why it has to be thrown out because of the bias in certain elections in certain counties, by definition, wouldn't that necessarily, if it gets declared unconstitutional, wipe out everything the General Assembly did for 2 years?
You're going to a different issue. Are you going to the issue about people that were elected here in North Carolina that were elected and now they're saying because of the gerrymandered districts that what they voted on doesn't matter?
Right.
You could make the case, and I think I made this case on social media, that's a bizarre way for the courts to look at things. Because if so, they could literally go back to the 1800s and say the entire North Carolina Constitution was adopted by people that were all racist and adopted a constitution in a racist time and say, well, everything in North Carolina history is racist. So, it's all thrown out and we start the government from scratch. So that has to be challenged. It can't be. Those were people that were sworn into office. They assume that duty, and whether you like it or not, they're there. I mean, you could go back and say, well, Jim Black was a criminal that was the Speaker of the House. Should anything that he helped pass, should that be thrown out? What about Meg Scott Phipps, who was our Agriculture Secretary and the granddaughter of a former governor and the daughter of a former governor that got indicted? What about that? What about Congressman, the one that had the judge Frank Balance Jr., that was a congressman and a judge? You've got to be. That's kind of a crazy way to look at things. It's revisionist in nature, and it really defies any kind of logical test.
And yet when you look at the far left, the quote woke that I go with, they do want to do exactly that.
But they never look in a mirror. It never applies to them.
Yeah.
So if their people were corrupt and it passed,
Right.
Wait a minute, we got to suspend our belief system for this is through the looking glass stuff.
But they want
never
to get rid of the Constitution.
Oh.
On the federal level, they think because it was made up during a quote racist time, and there's inklings out there that they're going to raise holy hell.
And it's an unfortunate reality that we look at things through the prism of today. You look at the founding of the country through the prism of today, and we judge people 200 years ago that if you lived at that time, you would have seen things at that time that way. These people were way ahead of their time. The people that were influenced by Locke and Hume and the Bible that put together a country, these were erudite. These were very brilliant people that had a variety of viewpoints, by the way, that didn't always agree. And the issue of slavery they knew was going to have to be resolved at some point in the future. So were there mistakes made? There's never a time in our country's history where we don't make them. The beauty of this country is we don't keep them forever. We challenge. That's our job, is to challenge. Right. We were given rights by a creator. We weren't given rights by government. So our job is to constantly challenge the government on the things that it does and the mistakes that it makes. And that's where I think we fall short. There are a significant number of people that think government is beyond reproach. We can't criticize it. No, we have an obligation to criticize it. Just the opposite.
That's what sets us apart from other countries, is we can criticize it. There are other countries, if you speak up, you might not be around much longer.
Sure.
Well, there was just a thing on Britain the other day. They arrested a man because he made someone feel bad.
Oh, they have a whole series of
They
laws
have a
on
whole
that.
series of laws like that over there because we don't have
And Australia's as well.
the amendments that we have on the
But
Bill of Rights.
wokeism is the gateway for that stuff now. Wokeism, where you were starting to pass, when you had safe spaces in college, no, all of college should have been a safe space. When you have these places where you can express yourself. No, the entire nation, from one sea to the other and the territories therein, you can express yourself. And so we must continue to be vigilant on this stuff and point it out for the absurdity that it is, without being called racist for saying so.
What's your thoughts on the probability of voter ID being taken down constitutionally?
We don't have voter ID. What are you talking about? You talking about nationally?
It's at the statewide.
At the statewide, we don't have voter ID in North Carolina. It's kind of weird that we walk in and you don't have to have an ID to vote.
I know, but there is a constitutional amendment that's out there, and they're trying to make sure it doesn't happen.
I think it needs to. It's a 65% issue, 2-1 across almost
party lines.
Yeah, even African Americans support it strongly. So this is a silly issue. It's one of those kind of like climate change where it's not that you can't even discuss climate change, and so you can't discuss race. These are things that the left thinks it owns, and it doesn't. And that's one of the problems we have. But we have to have it. Ultimately, voter ID will pass.
Do you think, this circles back to what we were talking about earlier, which is where the Republican Party is afraid to speak out on these things. You think they should step up and point this out much as you are doing right now? I think they should, because they could take the high ground almost instantly.
It's funny. The Republican Party has a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it's obligated to support Republican candidates and get them elected. That's the primary purpose of the party.
Correct.
Secondly, and as importantly, it has an obligation to support a platform of conservatism. It should. So, for instance, if Hillary Clinton decided she wanted to be a Republican tomorrow, there should be some degree of, wait a minute, you can't just do it because it's convenient. And we see it. We saw it in my county. My county in Lee years ago when I was chairman, we finally got a minority on the county commission, a minority on the city council. Then we became the majority on both. And it became it's a Republican county now. So what happened? Transactional Democrats became transactional Republicans. All the judges and lawyers and all the rest of them switched. The same thing happened here in Brunswick County. Brunswick County became red. This was Rex Gore and R.C. Souls country, and it took a long time and a lot of hard work. People like Bill and others and conservatives working in the trenches. And what happened? All the Democrats switched and became Republicans. Does that mean in their heart that they had the issues and cared about the issues that the Republican Party cared about? No. They wanted to be and stay in power. So is there any way that the Republican Party should hold people accountable? And I say that because over in New Hanover County, they just had this happen. Julia Bozeman, the first openly gay member of the General Assembly, was a senator, and her personal life has always been a train wreck. It's the stuff that if you saw it on TV, you'd say, it's not even believable. Stephen King would walk away from it. Yeah. So she has these horrible things happen, and yes, she gets back in power. She's the chairman of the county commission, and she's likely a felon or is crossed criminal lines. I mean, she admitted using coke and pot and stuff in a previous trial and still got elected. So she switches parties, and there's a denunciation by the party in New Hanover County GOP, not because of what she stood for, but because she's basically facing criminal prosecution. Whereas they really should say your voting record is something. Is there any kind of fealty to issues? And we don't do that. And I wish the Republican Party was better at means testing people in some way, because otherwise...
You got to give New Hanover Democratic Party a great send-off for her. What they said was, we're glad you're joining over there, taking your values over with them to a place that has the same values as you.
Yeah.
That was a great play on their part.
It was masterful, actually, that they did that, and the response was good, but not anywhere near what that level of that was.
Well, they fought her for 25 years, and now they want to reject her. The Republican Party wants to reject her out of hand. The Democrats want to get everyone. She's a hot potato right now. I don't want her. You want her? You want her?
Yeah.
And her personal life is still a train wreck, so I don't know what's going to happen there. But she is the chairman of the New Hanover County Commission, at least until December.
And then you look at the commission has done nothing. They can't throw her out, but they could censor
well,
her.
Zapple, to Rob Zapple's credit, who is a commissioner, he said she had no business being near the gavel. I mean, I will give him credit for that. And former Commissioner Woody White, a Republican, and several others. Jonathan Barfield has been oddly silent on a lot of this. A lot of Democrats have. And that's what happens. Whenever something blows up in the world of politics, if it's the other team, you're like, well, it sucks to be them right now. If it's your team, you're like, oh, it's really not that bad. Or you try to run. You have to decide, do I want to run away from them, or are they my friend? And that's just the nature of the political hot potato that Bozeman is. She's just a hot mess. Who knows? She might move to Brunswick County.
And getting worse by the day.
No.
Yeah.
No, we're cutting that bridge.
That river's not that wide,
That bridge is gone. We have to man it. We will man that bridge.
Have to take them both
I got
out.
people at Compass Point will come over and help. We'll build that barrier.
She's a wreck.
In a way, you talk about Bozeman. Liz Cheney in her own version is the same at a national level.
Yes.
She's about as wanted in the party as Mumps.
And that's an oddity. If you think about Liz Cheney, she had to know that her state is hardcore. I mean, the fact that she trotted out Kevin Costner, the actor who plays a very conservative character in Yellowstone, to wear a Liz Cheney shirt, it's got to be one of the most embarrassing. If I saw someone say, now something worse than Waterworld was Kevin Costner wearing the Liz Cheney shirt, which is hilarious to me.
Yeah.
So it is that Cheney spent more time fighting Trump than she did fighting the issues in the Democrat Party. And people can say it's about Trump, but ultimately it's because she didn't represent the values of her own party. The fact that Biden makes a phone call to her after she loses a Republican primary, that's hysterical to me. Number two, when the media interviews her, what's the first question, or at least the third question they ask? It's, are you planning to run for president?
Yes.
Now, this is someone, now I want you to think let's suspend our credulity with respect to her and say, is there any candidate you can name that can't even get 30% in their own primary with a name ID that exceeds 95%, that any media in their right mind would say, are you planning to run for president? Nobody would ever. She got shellacked with almost 100% name ID, and that's how badly she was rejected. And then to ask her if she's running for president, the only thing that she would like to do is become an unaffiliated and run against someone like Donald Trump to be the spoiler, to remove the ability. It's kind of like Ross Perot did to Bush the elder against Clinton.
But I also think you're looking at her other goal is to take down as many Trump lookalikes, if you will.
She's going to fight for the Democrats. Yeah, I mean, she essentially admitted, and yet the party hasn't thrown her out for party disloyalty for saying that. That's something that the party should have done. The National Party, this is to your point, I think, earlier, or yours, will the party, how strong will they be? She should be, I mean, for saying that, she should be thrown out. She's going to work against Republicans in an election to help Democrats and help the Democrats retain power in D.C. That's appalling.
Why do you think they won't do anything about it?
It's always mystified me that they don't go after people more aggressively on that. I think that you said it earlier, they want to be liked.
Yeah.
They want to be liked. They don't want to seem controversial. They don't want to seem like they're at this point defending Trump, and going after her makes it look like they're more closely affiliated with Trump. But I can't. You'd have to ask them. That's a great question for Mitt Romney's niece.
I think they're terrified of the New York Times, the Washington Post,
and they shouldn't be.
And
No.
they're not going to say anything nice about him anyway.
Even Mitt Romney came out and said she doesn't think she's
Yes.
a girl with a good chance of winning the presidency.
Yeah.
But there's my big burning overarching question that overshadows everything else. So we pull off this wave. Let's just say it, okay? Let's say we pull off this big red wave, right? Do these guys have the guts to now do what they should have done?
Ah, okay.
That's
So
the-
during McCrory's administration here in North Carolina, they did get some significant tax cuts, but they didn't go far enough. They were hesitant. They could have gone and guillotined and pulled off the things they wanted to, but Republicans, I think it's that Democrats are always afraid, or Republicans are always afraid people aren't going to understand what they want to accomplish, and Democrats are always afraid that people will. And that's what we're seeing.
I like
That's
that.
what we kind of
That's a
see
great one.
in this election is that Republicans are always hesitant. Their base instinct is to incrementally do things. Democrats' base instinct is we're going to lose, so we're going to put forth something grand that we're okay with losing some seats over. And you saw that with the Affordable Care Act. I
Right.
mean, they voted on Christmas Eve, for goodness sakes. But they were willing to take the scalping to pass legislation that was impossible to undo.
Yes.
And that's
And
exactly what they're doing now.
this-
they're pushing whatever they can through
This
right now.
inflation, increase act that they're passing is obscene, and it is unfathomable, and it should cost them many seats. And by into October, I think it will. I think they're gloating a little bit right now, and it seems like, oh my God, the world, everything is possible now. To think that Biden would defy history and become the first-term president in our lifetime to gain seats in the House
It is amazing.
is like a crack pipe. It's like a Hunter crack pipe,
It
right?
is, yep.
It just defies logic that he hadn't, that he's still out there.
Look, he
so.
outdrew Obama by
He
10 million
outdrew-
votes. Look at it.
Yeah, and so, but again, we can talk about that too if you want to, but that's another issue, and I've got my own opinion on that, as you would suspect.
I think we agree on that already.
But you got to realize a lot of people didn't like Trump that voted in that election.
Right.
It wasn't that they loved the basement-dwelling Biden; it's that they didn't like Trump or didn't like.
It was
the-
an anti-Trump vote,
But there's a
not a
lot of
pro-Biden
buyer's
vote.
remorse in that too. And people don't separate the issues from the individual. And I think that's one thing the Republicans have got to do is they've got to be the party of issues, and not emotion. And I hope that they can put forth that. I hope that Bud can put that out there, and the conservatives in general can make that. Because otherwise, what is the party? The party becomes largely irrelevant. And I think you see that now with the unaffiliated. The rise of the unaffiliated voter is they're kind of discouraged.
Yes.
Comment from Mr. McGill. This is hilarious considering the campaign that Dan Forrest ran.
Oh, I love McGill. McGill is I love that he's trolling us out here. He's a big time troll, former CNN guy. Dan Forrest ran an amazing campaign, but you got to look at it this way: that Dan Forrest had the grassroots. He had a head of steam going against, and then Cooper shut down fundraising. Now you got to remember when COVID first started, fundraising was essentially shut down. They also, ironically, pinned Dan Forrest with the mask stuff.
He began
Said
the
how,
mask
how horrible he was.
Yeah.
Now, history's proven that Dan Forrest was right.
Right, yeah.
Cooper was wrong. Mandy Cohen was wrong. The Democrats are the damage they've done to kids is going to take decades to undo. And Forrest it really became a basement campaign. He wasn't allowed to get out and campaign that much, and it didn't resonate with people. So Forrest, the lieutenant governor, none of the seats switched. And Democrats were angry about what Cooper did as well. So anybody, if Forrest was time limited out on his position as lieutenant governor, but if you look at what happened in that race, Cooper retained his seat, and that was a D, and the lieutenant governor stayed as an R. Falwell R.
Stein.
The new Stein. I mean, all of the positions that were held by Democrats before were held by Democrats again, and those held by Republicans were held by Republicans again. There was no real shift, except for the labor sector. That wasn't a shift, though. That was just so every Republican basically stayed a Republican seat. So McGill can take a pot shot at Dan Forrest all he wants, but nothing really changed. Had Dan Forrest run for lieutenant governor again, had he been able to, he'd have won. There was just no fundraising to go against Cooper.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, it's too bad because, having met Mr. Forrest, great man, I think he could have accomplished some great things.
Another guy that his mother was a congresswoman,
Right.
Sue Myrick, former mayor, and also he was an architect. He was a guy who came in and he said if you got to know Forrest, I got to spend a lot of time with him, and he was just a very humble guy, and he wasn't a mean guy. He was never mean to anyone, and when you spend enough time with a guy, you saw that he's like, well, wherever the voters go, that's fine. And even after the election, he's the same guy he was before he got in office. He didn't have to live, eat, and breathe politics.
Is he done, or is he just waiting his time? Do you know?
I don't know the path forward. Certainly with Hal Weatherman, his chief political guy, making, I think, the first strategic mistake I can think of that Hal made was going out west and joining Madison Cawthorn's campaign. But I think he stepped away from that. But he has been in the background working on a voter integrity project.
Yeah, he's doing EEF.
Yes,
along with Major
and
Dave.
don't underestimate Forrest's ability. I mean,
Weatherman.
Weatherman's ability to get stuff done. He's a remarkable political mind. He's been around this for a long time, and so I don't know. Forrest, I mean, you could see him as a Senate candidate sometime, But right now, I think he's comfortable being who he is with his wife and kids.
Fair to him, and we wish him well on that.
Yes, we do.
Speaking, there are a couple of questions we always ask people on the show.
Oh, here we go.
Here we go.
Oh Lord!
Line it up.
And it's
I
probably
have a feeling there are questions I used to ask people too. So.
well, no, it's actually this
gonna
one
be
has
directed
caused
at
more
me.
consternation than anything I've asked anybody.
That's why we moved out of the way.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's an
I have
interesting,
nothing really to
simple
throw
question.
except
right.
the
Yep.
well.
We just sat back.
Yeah,
so
straight
I noticed.
shot.
I noticed.
Yeah.
You know, the question is very simple. Tell the people listening something about you that no one knows.
Oh, aside from being a complete wackadoo. Okay.
I said
Let's
no one
see.
knows.
That no one knows. I grew up in Puerto Rico. A lot of people don't, they look at me and they don't realize that there's a lot of Puerto Rican here. But so my father worked with Bluebell, so I moved around a lot. So I was born in Virginia, and then I spent some time in the home of Elvis Presley. Anybody know where he was born? Any of the three of you?
Duluth.
Tupelo. Okay,
Tupelo,
so
Mississippi.
Tupelo, Mississippi.
Mississippi. I
So
didn't
then
know where, though.
down to Mayaguez, Puerto Rico. I was on the border, which is now real popular in a bad way, is Del Rio, Texas. That was one of my childhood homes. Nashville, Tennessee, and then North Carolina. So a lot of people don't realize that. They think this tremendous Southern accent, right, that I'm just kidding. That was it. I was very fortunate to live in many places, had a remarkable family. So that's one thing people probably don't realize.
Yeah,
or know.
we found out asking those questions that a lieutenant governor, for example, our current lieutenant governor, loves to go to train yards. We're not talking about the ones in your yard.
Yeah.
We're talking about big
I
trains.
remember that. It made
He
the news.
likes to go to train
He likes
yards and look
trains.
at them. We have judges that play musical instruments. We have one that can recite 7 or 8 stanzas of a
Oh,
poem.
you're talking about Ashley Gore.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Her astuteness with poetry and ability to remember it is remarkable.
And recite it
Yes,
beautifully.
yeah. Interesting. You mentioned Lieutenant Governor. Lieutenant Governor Forrest and I were born in the same hospital 5 months apart.
Wow.
Wow, there you go.
In
there's something.
That's up there
Harrisonburg,
on the list
right
now.
across from JMU in Harrisonburg, Virginia. So
Yeah, there's something we've learned again now.
it was a little. If you saw some of the houses I grew up in, it's weird. You hear about this white privilege stuff, and I look back and I visited one of my childhood homes in Harrisonburg. It's like a coal mining village. It's just these tiny homes. And, I was lucky. My dad worked hard, grew up in a traditional, but he worked hard. It was a one-family income. I can remember turning the lights off, Hey, if you walk out of a room, that light better be off. Turn the hot water heater off at night. Things like this that resonate. It was a conservative home from the beginning, from a valuation standpoint, the things that were expected of us as kids and stuff.
I
Anyway,
understand
sorry
that.
to keep on.
I was the first one in my family to graduate high school and college.
Oh.
So, that goes back. And go ahead. Give me the one room.
No,
I knew that was coming.
I was going to say something about, did you take the horse and buggy on the way there?
Hey, now don't laugh at that. Wasn't that my mother grew up in Columbus County, in Tabor City, and still had the pump. You had to prime the pump to get water. And
Mom grew up in a
so
in a
Mike
farm
would
in Oklahoma.
McGill would appreciate this if you watch it. My mother was a Wright from Columbus County, and so my dad was an Adams, and that makes me half right.
I have a question for you.
Huh?
I have a question for
Sure.
you. Did you, not even a question, did you know that in many counties in North Carolina, there's still law on the books that tells them they have to tie their horse up before they enter a building?
We have a lot of strange laws in North Carolina. That may be one of them. There are things that you can't do on Sunday, and
But don't you say it's more like the Romans? Like the Romans
Sure.
never
Hey,
changed
my-
the law. They just
My
added.
grandfather in Columbus County used to take, and this sounds like I'm that old. I'm not that old, but it was just the transition of times. They took buggies down to Calabash, and they would fish at Sunset area, and then salt the fish down and take a buggy back, and they would walk and buggy back to Columbus County. Take them 2 or 3 days.
Well, Bill's thing was his notebook was a stone tablet, but
I like that.
Oh, now we're getting carried away. Okay.
you might want to go to break right about now. Let's let
Yeah,
it go
I
on
think
that
we
one.
should pay
I thought he had
attention.
more questions to throw my way.
Let's pay a few bills before we shut down and I have some time to get even.
Oh.
Ugh.
This show is also sponsored by Dr. Tony Maglione. Dr. Tony is a cardiologist practicing in Wilmington. He accepts Medicare patients, and his office is located across the street from New Hanover Regional Medical Center at 2032 17th Street. The office number is 202-1071. Dr. Tony is an author whose last book is Rules for Conservative Patriots, and it can be purchased on Amazon. His website is www.drtonymag.com.
The Boiling Spring Lakes Motel, located at 2 North Shore, is a peaceful and convenient place to stay. Newly renovated rooms with a comfortable back porch welcomes everyone. Discount rates are available to those who might need more time. Close to the beach, everything you need for a fun vacation. Call Stephanie at 910-845-2893. Boiling Spring Lakes Motel.
Veteran Awareness sponsored by You Are Not Alone. Today's veteran homeless rate is approximately 19,750, and the numbers are declining because of the various veteran programs. If you or a veteran you know is homeless, please call 877-4AID-VET. This is a confidential and toll-free call. From this veteran to other veterans, please be there to help our brother and sister veterans. Again, the number is 1-877-424-3838. And thank you for your service.
Marine Service Pro and the Tackle Box Seafood, located at 8210 River Road, Southport, is open Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, with the Tackle Box open Monday through Saturday, 7 to 6. Marine Service Pro is a full Suzuki and Tohatsu dealership. They deal in pre-owned boats, full service and repair, with certified technicians in all engines, and fiberglass specialists. The Tackle Box offers fresh local seafood, live bait, a tackle shop, and fish packing and shipping. They also offer a full-service U-Haul dealership. Spend time with Leon or Jenny for one-stop shopping at Marine Service Pro and the Tackle Box Seafood, 8210 River Road, Southport. Folks, you must visit Angie's Fresh Produce, 4447 Long Beach Road, Southport. Beautiful fresh produce at a great price. Angie's has just about every vegetable you want. In-store shopping and pickup, and all wheelchair accessible. Call Angie's Fresh Produce at 910-477-9068.
And here we are, an hour into the show, and we've had such a great time. Time has just whizzed by as always.
It has.
We do need to expand this show.
Yeah, we really do need to
Because
expand
an hour
the
is
show.
never enough. We run into this every week.
You know, it really is. Greta needs her own hour to sit between the two that you and I do. So,
That's a good
that
point.
would kind of work for that.
That is a good point.
Anyway, we're close to shutting down again, but before we close down tonight's show, we need to discuss who's going to be with us next week. And
So
you've arranged that, sir.
Yes, next week we have Danny Rashani joining us. I hope I'm saying his last name right. He was going to be with us last week. Unfortunately, we had some technical difficulties. So he'll be joining us to share his thoughts as a gay conservative Republican.
Cool.
And how he navigates through the world. I'm trying to
You're doing well there.
be good
so
with
far.
that. Hey, don't forget, there's
He
another
also-
awesome show that's on Fridays at 1.
Yeah, your wife has a great show.
Yes, she does. It's called Living Fit After 50, and we've got a really good guest on that one this
I
week.
thought it was living fat after 50. But
That would be you, Bill.
But anyway,
Wow. Really?
here we
You
go.
want me to go there as a trainer?
Go for it. I'll pay for
All
it
right.
Thursday. But
Yeah, so Friday at 1 o'clock, Living Fit After 50. Come see us there, too.
And how much time we got to talk a little bit about Dan?
1 minute.
We got a whole minute to play. He has a gym called Hot Wax. Isn't that the right one?
Hot Works.
Hot Works. Hot Wax. Hot Works. Close enough for government work.
Oh, my God, Bill.
Well, I was thinking of what he does in there.
Yeah,
And anyway, if you
his-
ever want to go to a gym and you go into a sauna and work out, that's what his gym is.
And Dan Forrest did a
He did a show there. He
He
did
did
an he did a stop there.
meet and greet there.
Falwell does hot yoga, which is another thing I can't fathom doing.
brutal.
108 degrees
I've
or
done that,
something.
and I love it.
That's what he puts you in a room fully and you exercise
Bill
in a
needs
sauna.
to do it.
Yes.
Ouch.
Keep it up. Wait till Thursday.
Yeah, wait till Thursday, Bill. On that note,
All right, I guess it's time for us to sign out, and thank you for coming in and joining
Yes,
us.
thank you.
We want to
Pleasure.
encourage you again to get back on the air because you need to.
Thank you.
And, you know, we're also encouraged that we can expand our show here anytime.
I think we're going to have to at some point.
Yeah, I really do. We're going to have to work on more.
Because
people
every
there.
week we run out of time.
Yeah, because we just don't have time for you to write a banner and get this other
For
stuff
real.
covered.
All right, close it down, friends.
All right. See you next week on All Things Brunswick.
Have a good one, everybody.
Bye.